everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Sadlier School Live. My name is Kimberly Woods, and I'm happy to be bringing back with us today Dr. Matthew Beyrenavand. Hello, Matthew.
Hello, Cam. How are you doing today?
I am doing great, and I'm really excited for us to dive into today's topic. But before we do, I want to remind any of you who are viewing this video live with us to go ahead and drop us a chat, say hello. We would love to connect with you. And if you're watching the replay, we would love to connect with you as well. So go ahead and leave a comment on this video and we'll say hello.
So, Cam, today's episode, what we're doing is keeping with the theme of what we started yesterday about some things that we can use outside of the technology world that have that low barrier of entry, but yet a high ceiling of the types of things you can do either as a teacher, as a parent, or in some cases, the parent is playing the teacher with the virtual learning that we're doing today. In this time. And today what we're going to do is an activity that is oftentimes an introductory activity to a lesson, and it's called Notice and Wonder. And what this is here, as I mentioned, is a low barrier of entry where there's not a lot of specific direction, similar to what we did yesterday, which one doesn't belong, and instead gives everybody an opportunity to kind of think, come up with their own ideas, and then be able to discuss it. And that would eventually lead to whatever the lesson or topic would be for a given day. And so what I want to do is share a few examples and kind of go through them with you as to what it might look in a classroom, or if you're working with your own children, as a way to elicit discussion, conversation, without that fear of being wrong, because you know what? You really can't be wrong when you're doing activities like this. So I am showing you a picture of a building, Cam, and what I'd like to ask you to do is to tell me a few things that you notice or observe, and a few things that you are authentically curious about when you look at this particular image.
Yeah, so one thing I noticed is there's like solar panels on the top of this building, and they're laid out in a grid that almost looks like graph paper.
Excellent. That's a very good notice. Anything else you notice?
I also notice, and I don't think this has to do with math, but it is interesting to me, is that there's a bunch of poles on the top of this building, and they're all knocked down for some reason.
And you know, that is absolutely great. And it's important to allow people such as yourself to say things that really have nothing to do with it. Like, why are those poles knocked down? Or why are there no windows in this place? Or, you know, what is it? Is it a school? Like, what's the environment? You get that out, and that's okay. Just what do you notice? And eventually it'll lead us to where we want to go. So now my second question for you, Cam, is what is it you wonder when you look at this?
I wonder why they have these solar panels, or are they solar panels on top of the building? And also, why do we have this yellow, it looks like a pipe or a rope that is also running through the top of the building?
That is excellent. And some other things that people might wonder about is about why there are certain spots where there are no solar panels, if you will. And what eventually it will lead to is trying to come up with an estimate as to how many solar panels there are. So let me tell you something, Cam, before we even get to this idea of coming up with a prediction, I want to tell you, I have done this activity with over 20 different elementary and middle school classes, and never once has anybody got it absolutely correct, the correct answer. And I tell you that not to make people feel bad, but to make you feel comfortable knowing that you're not going to be correct. And it's not about the correct answer. It's about the thinking process and what you do to come up with it. So here's what I'm going to ask of you, Cam. I'm going to ask of you to try to make a prediction as how many solar panels you see here and what might be the process that you use to come up with it. And I'll tell you, you're probably not going to be correct, and that's okay.
Okay. Well, when I look at this building and I look at the left side of the structure, on the top, you see two little squared off sections almost.
Yes.
And if I look at the grids in one of those sections, I can see that it's about 5 or 6 grids across and 5 or 6 grids deep. That kind of varies depending on the different areas of the building I'm looking at. So I would say that in that little square over on the left hand, like let's take the left hand upper side, that square
Perfect.
up there.
So about how many would you estimate based on it being either 5 or 6 by 5 or 6? What do you think it would be?
So I'm going to say here it's about 36. I mean, it's missing 3, but if I did a 6 by 6, we're looking at about 36 different grids.
Okay, and then what would be your process next that you would do?
So then I would maybe move to the square area directly below that on the left-hand side. And so again, we have about 6 across and 6 down. So I would give that another 36 and double that number.
Okay, so the approach that you are taking here is you're breaking it down and trying to do an estimate of each different section, which is a great strategy. Some other people might try to do an estimate, making it into a big rectangle as like a base and a height. Some other people might say exactly what you did, say that top is about 30. And how many of those do you think, putting them in different spots, would there be total? And again, this is the conversation that is so rich to have with students, where they're thinking about it on their own, they're coming up with their own reason, and it's a safe place because we know we're not going to be correct. And I don't, nor do teachers, care about the correct answer. It's about the process. And then once we come up with our answer and we learn the actual number, if it wasn't close, then reviewing and revising it based on where we could have been a little bit too high or too low here. But let me ask you this. Are you interested in finding out the actual number that's on that number of solar panels?
Yeah, I am.
Well, I would tell you yes, that if it was done in this format, I would tell you nearly 100% of children now want to know the answer because it was done in a very safe, welcoming format here, as opposed to this being a, quote, multiple choice question or just figure it out, where they say, I don't really care. So I kind of, I don't want to use the word I tricked you, but I piqued your curiosity and interest by starting off with the what do you notice, what do you wonder, and then guiding you here. So I will tell you, last night I went on the top of this building and I counted every solar panel, and the number of solar panels is actually 582. Wow. And as I said, no one has ever gotten that correct answer, but again, that's not important. And what I want to do now is share with you a few other great images of noticing and wondering. And there's a variety of websites that these can be found, mainly looking through Google, unlike what we did yesterday where we had that one particular website for which one doesn't belong. This has a lot of different things, particularly stuff that comes out from NCTM. This here is an incredible number grid that actually is a board game that has been created by the great Dan Finkel. And it is basically a way to understand numbers, patterns, relationships in a colorful and meaningful way, as opposed to the traditional, 100 numbers written down together. So just quickly, can you tell me anything that you notice or wonder about on this here?
Yeah, so one thing that sticks out immediately to me is that the even numbers have orange on their little circle around the number somewhere. Some of them are entirely orange, while others, like the number 6, is half orange and half green.
And just for curiosity, do you happen to have a prediction about, let's say, what the orange and green might represent?
Okay, so it looks like the orange actually has to represent maybe the number 2.
Okay,
and
so
the green represents the number 3. So it looks like if we take 6, 2 times 3, the orange and the green equals 6.
Cam, you nailed it. Excellent. And so what we're learning here is the factors of 6 are 2 and 3, or a multiple of both 2 and 3 is 6. And we also can look at so many other things in which, instead of me saying to my children or to a student, let me teach you about multiples or prime numbers or composite numbers or all this hogwash, let me have you come up with the realization. Let me have you come up with the pattern, because remember, mathematics is the study of patterns. And this comes from, as I said, a board game that's called Prime Climb. Let me, in our last couple minutes here, share a few other of my favorite notice and wonders that have elicited some incredible conversations. Here's one. I live in the Northeast, so you may not be a Dunkin' Donuts fan like I am, but instead of the traditional method of a textbook which says, well, which one has the highest unit rate or lowest unit rate, let me just show you this picture. And generally what students would first say is, well, how come the coffee cup in the small is made of a different type than the rest? And I have wondered that as well. But eventually we'll go to figuring out what the unit rates are. And then we could talk about how the more you buy, the lower the unit rate, and do a little bit of mathematics here. It doesn't have to be advanced. It could be your own drawing here, where I'm curious about maybe what are the dimensions of the sink, or what's the perimeter of this figure, or the area. Instead of me as the teacher telling you what I'm telling you what's important, why don't you tell me what's important, and I will guide the conversation to where it needs to be. And I will tell you 10 times out of 10, this leads to a more intellectually stimulating lesson. This is a more of an upper middle school one that is actually a beautiful proof of the Pythagorean theorem. But instead of going through it and saying, well, let me show you a proof and break it down, just look at this figure. There is so much to unpack and try to interpret here. There's no rules, there's no numbers, there's no directions. It's just, what do you notice here? And there's such great conversations that all students, including your intentional non-learners, are going to come up with, that it's going to just brighten your classroom. Or if it's something we're doing at home with our kids, we'll brighten the home that we live in, as opposed to where many kids are being frustrated. And the last thing, this is probably my absolute favorite one here, which eventually could be figuring out areas and looking at circles here. But just looking at this here, and I will tell you that you can have some incredible conversations about the different circles, and eventually people are going to wonder and ask about the area of the 16 smaller circles as compared to the one bigger circle, and then we might try to figure it out. But again, all we're doing here is putting it with a very low barrier of entry, oftentimes no numbers at all, although there can be numbers. And we're just saying, start off by making observations. What do you notice? And then from there, tell me what things you're curious about. Let me hear those, and then that will guide us. And by doing that, it's going to get the kids authentically interested, which is what we often struggle with. I shouldn't say often, we mostly struggle with when we teach mathematics.
I think these are genius ways for us to incorporate math discourse into our homes and our classrooms, and to get kids excited about it, because the way you've laid this out for us, Matthew, it feels more like a game for the child, right? The game or the challenge of picking out that pattern, and let's talk through the problem solving. Like you said, like, are we finding the diameter? Are we counting the solar units that are on top of a building? And I know that my own children are always down for a game or some sort of challenge. And I think this is a really fun way to get them excited about math in a way that doesn't feel too daunting or scary.
You're absolutely right. Children, 100% of them like play, like games. They like things where they don't feel pressure. And in addition to the games that we've talked about on this series here, and what we talked about yesterday, which one doesn't belong, this here is a safe place to explore, play, and learn mathematics in its beautiful nature, which is not always meant to be solving for this or doing this. It's just observing, finding patterns, exploring, and then maybe eventually determining a solution to something, but not yet. Don't rush to what we want them to do at the end. Let's focus on that beginning part.
Well, and I also love that the conversation sparks creativity as well, because a lot of times people don't think that creativity and math can go hand in hand, but they do. And when you can partner the two, again, it makes the game feel a little bit more exciting.
So this one is called Noticing and Wondering. And yesterday was Which One Doesn't Belong, under the theme for this week of just low barrier of entry where everybody could participate, but yet a high ceiling because you could take it to as high a level as the students are interested or capable of doing.
Yeah, which again works great for a parent like me who has kids of different ages at home. Because of that low barrier to entry, the whole family can play the game together. And sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I look forward to when we do this again next week, maybe checking in to see if you did either of these two activities with your kids and how it might have went, because I love hearing stories from not only you, but from our Facebook listeners here when they respond about what they have tried. So if you are watching this live or on delay, if you've done something like this, or if you try it, we would love to hear back from you how it went.
Yes. And Dr. Matthew has shown us some other fun ways that we can incorporate games into mathematics. And we have some past master classes that you can access to uncover some more of those games. So I've linked to those master classes in the comments here on Facebook Live today. So if you check out that link, you will get immediate access to his past master classes. And at the end of taking the master class series, you are able to qualify for a certificate of participation. So check that out if you are needing some of those professional development hours. Matthew, thank you again for being here today. And you will be back with us next week here on Sadlier School Live. But for other people who are interested in joining this week, I will be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, and we'll be talking about Greek and Latin words. So we're going to pivot and go more into literacy focus tomorrow. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Great to see you, Cam. I'll see you next week.
Okay. Ciao.
Bye-bye.